In a remote mountain cabin during a violent snowstorm, a lone man awakens to desperate scratching at his door. Hesitantly opening it, he finds a severely shaking pit bull, snow-covered and visibly weakened. By deciding to shelter it, he triggers a series of unexpected events. Hours later, he finds himself frantically calling the police, fearing for his life. In the rugged wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, a lone cabin stood defiant against the harsh winter landscape. This was the home of John, a reclusive former firefighter who had traded the chaos of city life for the serene solitude of nature. The cabin, constructed of sturdy pine logs and river stones, blended seamlessly into the surrounding forest of towering evergreens. As night fell, a fierce blizzard engulfed the mountainside. Howling winds whipped snow into frenzied swirls, obscuring the world beyond John's frost-coated windows. Inside, the crackling fireplace cast a warm, flickering glow across the rustic interior, filled with handcrafted furniture and mementos of a life left behind. John sat in his favorite armchair, sipping hot cocoa and listening to the storm's fury. The radio crackled with warnings of record-breaking low temperatures and treacherous conditions. It was the kind of night when even the hardiest mountain creatures sought shelter. Suddenly, above the wind's roar, a sound cut through, desperate scratching at the cabin door. John froze, his mug suspended midway to his lips. In all his years of mountain living, he'd never encountered anything like this. The scratching intensified, accompanied now by a pitiful whine that tugged at his heart. With cautious steps, John approached the door. His hand hesitated on the latch, mind racing with possibilities. What creature could be seeking refuge on such a hellish night? Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself and slowly opened the door, letting in a gust of icy wind and a flurry of snow. Huddled on John's doorstep, shivering violently, was a large, muscular pit bull. The dog's short coat, normally a rich brindle, was matted with snow and ice. Its amber eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion, met John's gaze with a silent plea for help. John, a man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and weathered features, felt his initial apprehension melt away at the sight of the desperate animal. His years as a firefighter had honed his instincts to help those in need, whether human or animal. "Easy there, big fella," John murmured, his voice a soothing contrast to the howling wind. He knelt slowly, extending a calloused hand toward the dog. The pit bull flinched at first, but then cautiously inched forward, drawn by the promise of warmth and safety. As the dog came closer, John noticed the myriad of scars crisscrossing its muscular frame. Some were old and faded, others more recent, telling a silent story of a harsh past. Despite this, there was no aggression in the dog's demeanor, only weariness and a glimmer of hope. "Come on in, buddy. Let's get you warmed up," John said, gently ushering the dog inside. As they entered the cabin's warmth, John's mind raced with questions. Where had this dog come from? How had it survived in such brutal conditions? And why did it bear the marks of such obvious mistreatment? John quickly set about caring for his unexpected guest. He grabbed some old towels from a nearby cupboard and began gently drying the pit bull, all the while speaking in low, soothing tones. The dog, though initially tense, gradually relaxed under John's ministrations, its tail giving a tentative wag. As he worked, John's mind wandered to his past. He had always been an animal lover, but his busy life as a firefighter in Denver had never allowed for pets. Now, in his self-imposed exile, he found himself face to face with a creature in desperate need of help. Blizzard, for his part, seemed to sense John's good intentions. Despite his obvious exhaustion and the trauma evident in his scars, the pit bull's eyes never left John, following his every move with a mixture of wariness and growing trust. Once Blizzard was dry, John led him to the fireplace, laying out a thick blanket for the dog to rest on. He then went to the kitchen, returning with a bowl of warm water and some leftover stew. Blizzard's tail thumped against the floor in gratitude as he lapped up the offerings. As the night wore on, John found himself unable to sleep, his mind churning with questions about Blizzard's origins. He watched as the dog, now fed and warm, drifted into an uneasy sleep, occasionally whimpering and twitching as if reliving past traumas. As dawn broke, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of pink and gold, John was startled awake by the sound of scratching at his door once again. His heart raced, mind immediately flashing to Blizzard's arrival the night before. The pit bull, still curled up by the dying embers of the fireplace, lifted his head alertly, ears perked forward. John approached the door cautiously, Blizzard padding softly behind him. As he opened it, a gust of frigid air rushed in, along with a smaller, younger pit bull. The newcomer, a blue-nosed pup no more than a year old, stumbled in, clearly exhausted and hungry. John watched in amazement as the two dogs interacted, the realization dawning on him. "They're family," he murmured to himself. "Father and son, maybe?" Over the next few days, John found himself adjusting to life with his new canine companions. He named the younger pit bull Avalanche, or Avi for short, noting how the pup's energetic bursts seemed to tumble through the cabin like a miniature snowslide. As John observed the pair, he was struck by the depth of their bond. Blizzard, despite his own injuries and trauma, was fiercely protective of Avi. He would often position himself between the pup and the door, as if anticipating danger. At night, they slept curled together, Blizzard's larger form curved protectively around Avi's smaller one. John found himself increasingly drawn into their world. His mornings now started with the excited patter of paws as Avi demanded breakfast, while Blizzard watched with what John swore was an amused expression. During the day, John would take them on short walks in the snow, carefully monitoring their strength and stamina. These outings revealed more about the dogs' personalities. Blizzard was cautious but curious, always alert for potential threats. Avi, on the other hand, bounded through the snow with puppyish enthusiasm, often diving headfirst into snowdrifts, only to emerge with a snout full of snow and a wagging tail. As the dogs began to trust him more, John noticed subtle changes in their behavior. Blizzard, initially wary of sudden movements, started to relax in John's presence. One evening, as John sat reading by the fire, he felt a gentle weight against his leg. Looking down, he saw Blizzard had chosen to rest his head on John's knee, those soulful amber eyes gazing up at him with newfound trust. Evie, too, was coming out of his shell. His playful nature emerged more each day, and he began to seek out John for belly rubs and games of tug-of-war with an old rope John had found. As John watched them heal and grow, he felt something shifting within himself as well. The solitude he had sought in these mountains no longer seemed as appealing. Instead, he found himself looking forward to the dog's antics, their unconditional affection slowly chipping away at the walls he had built around his heart. As the days turned into weeks, John's bond with Blizzard and Avi deepened, revealing more layers to their personalities and histories. Blizzard, while generally calm and protective, occasionally displayed moments of playfulness that hinted at a younger, carefree dog beneath the scars. These glimpses usually came during playtime with Avi, when Blizzard would suddenly drop into a playbow, tail wagging furiously, inviting his younger companion to a game of chase. Ilvi, for his part, was blossoming under the safety and care provided by John and Blizzard. His initial timidity gave way to an exuberant, loving nature. He developed a particular fondness for John's old firefighter boots, often dragging them around the cabin as if they were prized toys. John found himself opening up as well. He began talking to the dogs, sharing stories of his past, the adrenaline-fueled rescues, the camaraderie of the firehouse, and the tragedy that had ultimately driven him to seek solitude in the mountains. Though the dogs couldn't respond in words, their attentive ears and sympathetic eyes provided a comfort John hadn't realized he'd been missing. One night, as a particularly fierce storm raged outside, John was awakened by Blizzard's low whimpers. Finding the dog trembling in the corner, John realized that the howling wind must have triggered memories of Blizzard's traumatic past. Without hesitation, John sat on the floor beside him, gently stroking his fur and murmuring words of comfort until the dog's shaking subsided. It was in moments like these that John fully grasped the depth of the dog's past suffering and the remarkable resilience they showed. He marveled at their capacity for trust and love, despite whatever horrors they had endured. As John cared for Blizzard and Avi, he felt the ice around his own heart continuing to thaw. The pain and guilt that had driven him to isolation began to feel less overwhelming in the face of the unconditional love these two dogs offered. For the first time in years, John found himself looking forward to each new day, eager to see what small joys and progress it might bring. As John, Blizzard, and Avi settled into their newfound routine, the harsh mountain winter presented its first major challenge. A severe snowstorm, more intense than any John had experienced since moving to the cabin, descended upon them. The howling winds and heavy snowfall trapped them indoors for days, testing the limits of John's preparedness and the dog's patience. The isolation, once a comfort to John, now felt oppressive. He worried about their dwindling supplies and the possibility of medical emergencies, not just for himself, but for Blizzard and Avi as well. The dogs, sensing John's unease, became restless. Avi's usually playful demeanor gave way to anxious pacing, while Blizzard grew more vigilant, constantly checking the windows and door as if expecting a threat. As the storm raged on, John noticed Blizzard favoring his left hind leg, the limp becoming more pronounced with each passing day. The old injury, likely a remnant of his mysterious past, seemed to be flaring up due to the cold and confinement. John's limited veterinary knowledge was put to the test as he tried to ease Blizzard's discomfort with warm compresses and gentle massages. Avi too began to show signs of stress. The young dog's energy, usually an endless source of amusement, became almost manic in the confined space. He chewed through one of John's favorite books and scratched at the door incessantly, whining to be let out despite the dangerous conditions outside. The storm also brought unexpected wildlife encounters. One morning, John awoke to find a young, disoriented moose had wandered onto his porch, seeking shelter from the blizzard. The presence of the large animal sent Blizzard into a protective frenzy, barking and growling at the perceived intruder. John struggled to calm the dog while also trying to figure out how to safely encourage the moose to move on without putting anyone at risk. As the days wore on, cabin fever set in. John found himself snapping at the dogs over small infractions, immediately regretting his short temper when he saw their confused and hurt expressions. The guilt compounded his stress, creating a tense atmosphere in what had become their shared haven. The lack of fresh food began to take its toll as well. John had to carefully ration their meals, which led to Avi's pitiful whines at feeding time and Blizzard's mournful looks. John's own stomach often growled in sympathy, but he prioritized the dog's nutrition over his own. Perhaps the most pressing concern was the dwindling firewood supply. John hadn't anticipated such a prolonged storm and found himself facing the very real possibility of losing their primary heat source. The thought of Blizzard and Avi shivering in the cold was unbearable, driving John to consider increasingly desperate measures to keep them warm. As the blizzard showed no signs of abating, John realized that their survival would depend not just on his resourcefulness, but on the strength of the bond they had forged. The challenges they faced would test not only their physical endurance, but also the depths of their newfound family connection. As the storm entered its second week, a new and unexpected challenge arose. The constant howling of the wind had masked another sound, one that sent chills down John's spine when he finally heard it. It was the distant but unmistakable sound of snowmobiles. John's first thought was one of relief. Perhaps rescue was on its way, but as the sound grew closer, he noticed Blizzard's reaction. The dog's ears flattened against his head, and a low, warning growl rumbled in his chest. Avi, picking up on Blizzard's distress, began to whimper and hide behind John's legs. The dog's behavior triggered John's instincts, honed from years as a first responder. Something wasn't right. He dimmed the lights in the cabin and cautiously peeked out through a gap in the curtains. What he saw confirmed his fears. 3 snowmobiles, their riders dressed in dark clothing, were circling the area around the cabin. These weren't rescuers. Their furtive movements suggested something far more sinister. John's mind raced. Were these men connected to Blizzard and Avi's mysterious past? Had they tracked the dogs all the way here? The realization that he might be harboring fugitives from some criminal operation hit John hard. He was no longer just a man caring for 2 stray dogs. He was now potentially in the crosshairs of dangerous individuals. As the snowmobiles drew nearer, John had to make quick decisions. He couldn't risk the men finding Blizzard and Avi, but the storm outside was still too dangerous for escape. With limited options, John ushered the dogs into the small root cellar beneath the cabin's floor. It was cramped and cold, but it was their best chance at hiding. Just as John closed the cellar door, a heavy knock sounded at the cabin's entrance. His heart pounding, John took a deep breath and opened the door, coming face to face with 3 burly men, their faces partially obscured by ski masks. John, drawing on years of experience keeping calm in high-pressure situations, managed to keep his voice steady. "No, sir. Haven't seen any dogs out here. Storm's been too bad for anything to survive." John knew that refusing would only increase their suspicions, but allowing them inside put Blizzard and Avi at risk. As he stood there, caught in this impossible dilemma, he heard a faint whimper from beneath the floorboards. The sound was barely audible over the howling wind, but it was enough to make one of the men cock his head, listening intently. In that moment, John realized that the true test of his commitment to Blizzard and Avi was about to begin. Whatever he decided next would determine not just his fate, but that of the 2 innocent creatures who had come to depend on him. In that critical moment, John's firefighter training kicked in. He knew he needed to control the situation and protect Blizzard and Avi at all costs. With a calculated risk, he stepped out onto the porch, partially closing the door behind him to block the men's view inside. "Gentlemen," John said, his voice firm but non-confrontational, "I understand you're looking for something important, but I can't in good conscience let strangers into my home, especially in these conditions. Why don't you tell me more about these dogs you're looking for? Maybe I can help." The lead man, clearly frustrated but seemingly unwilling to force his way in, grudgingly provided a description of Blizzard and Avi. As he spoke, John's suspicions were confirmed. These men were definitely connected to the dog's troubled past. While they talked, John's mind raced, formulating a plan. He needed to misdirect these men and get them away from the cabin. Drawing on his knowledge of the local terrain, John spun a tale about hearing dogs barking near a cave system about 5 miles north, suggesting the animals might have sought shelter there. The men exchanged glances, clearly weighing the credibility of John's story. After a tense moment, the leader nodded. "All right, we'll check it out, but we'll be back if we don't find anything. Don't go anywhere." "It's okay, boys," John soothed, his voice low and urgent, "but we need to move now." As John prepared for their escape, he realized that this moment marked a turning point. He was no longer just a caretaker for these dogs. He had become their protector, willing to risk everything to keep them safe. The bond between them, forged in the quiet days of healing and companionship, was now being tested in the crucible of danger. With time running short, John led Blizzard and Avi out into the raging storm. The wind howled around them, snow pelting their faces as they trudged through deep drifts. John had chosen a treacherous route down the mountain, one that would be difficult for the snowmobiles to follow. Blizzard, sensing the urgency of their situation, stayed close to John's side, helping to guide Avi through the challenging terrain. The younger dog, though scared, showed remarkable resilience, pushing through his fear to keep pace with his companions. As they navigated the perilous mountain path, John's mind was in overdrive. He knew they couldn't outrun the snowmobiles forever. They needed a more permanent solution, a safe haven where he could protect the dogs and expose the truth about their past. Inside the shaft, John used his flashlight to examine their surroundings. The space was cramped but defensible. He quickly set about creating a small camp, using thermal blankets to retain heat and setting up a makeshift alarm system with tin cans and string at the entrance. As they huddled together in the dim light, John noticed Blizzard's protective stance at the entrance of the shaft, ears alert for any sign of danger. Avi, exhausted from their escape, curled up close to John, seeking comfort. "Cap, it's John," he said when a gruff voice answered. "I need your help. It's about a dog-fighting ring, I think, and some very bad people are after me, and 2 dogs I rescued." The captain's response was immediate and reassuring. "Sit tight, John. I'm calling in some favors. We'll get you and those dogs out of there." The hours crawled by in the cramped mining shaft as John, Blizzard, and Avi waited anxiously for help to arrive. The howling wind outside masked any approaching sounds, keeping them on constant edge. John's eyes darted between the shaft entrance and his canine companions, his hand resting reassuringly on Blizzard's back. Suddenly, Blizzard's ears perked up, his body tensing. Moments later, John heard it too, the distant rumble of engines cutting through the storm. His heart raced. Was it help arriving, or had their pursuers found them? As the sound grew closer, John made a difficult decision. He couldn't risk endangering Blizzard and Avi if it was the dogfighters. "Stay here," he whispered to the dogs, gently pushing them further back into the shaft. Blizzard whined softly, clearly reluctant to let John face the potential threat alone. John crept towards the entrance, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Peering out, he saw multiple vehicles approaching through the swirling snow, SUVs, not snowmobiles. Relief washed over him as he recognized the lead vehicle. It bore the markings of the Colorado State Police. As John stepped out to signal the approaching vehicles, a shot rang out, splintering rock near his head. He dove back into the shaft, heart pounding. The dogfighters had arrived too, having somehow tracked them to the mine. In the confined space of the shaft, Blizzard began to growl, his protective instincts kicking in. Avi whimpered, pressing closer to John. The sounds of the firefight outside were clearly distressing the dogs, and John feared they might bolt in panic. A voice called out from outside, barely audible over the gunfire and howling wind. "John, this is Captain Reynolds. Are you in there?" As John weighed their options, a canister rolled into the shaft entrance, hissing as it released a cloud of tear gas. The acrid smoke quickly filled the confined space, causing John and the dogs to cough and gag. With one arm shielding his eyes and the other holding the dogs close, John prepared to make a desperate dash through the tear gas and gunfire towards the safety of the police lines. The next few seconds would determine not just their survival, but the fate of the bond they had forged in the face of adversity. John took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Stay close," he commanded Blizzard and Avi, his voice hoarse from the tear gas. With one final glance at his canine companions, he surged forward into the chaos outside. The world beyond the shaft was a blur of swirling snow and gunfire. John's eyes stung from the tear gas, his lungs burning with each breath. He could feel Blizzard pressing against his leg, guiding Avi as they ran. The sound of bullets whizzing past spurred them on, adrenaline overriding the pain and fear. Suddenly, a large figure loomed in front of them. One of the dogfighters had broken through the police line. The man reached for John, his intentions clear. But before he could grab him, Blizzard sprang into action. The pitbull launched himself at the attacker, not with aggression, but with enough force to knock the man off balance. John seized the moment, pushing past the stumbling criminal. He scooped up Avi, who was struggling in the deep snow, and made a final sprint towards safety. Blizzard was right beside him, matching him stride for stride. "We need a medic here," Captain Reynolds shouted, rushing to John's side. "And get those dogs some blankets." "Not without them," John replied firmly, gesturing to Blizzard and Avi. The dogs, sensing his distress, pressed closer to him, Blizzard's eyes never leaving John's face. As John was loaded into the ambulance, Blizzard and Avi by his side, he finally allowed himself to relax slightly. They had made it through the immediate danger, but he knew their ordeal wasn't over. Questions about the dogfighting ring, the fate of the criminals, and the future of Blizzard and Avi still hung in the air. Looking down at the two dogs huddled close to him, John made a silent promise. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The unlikely family forged in the mountains had emerged from their trial by fire, their bond stronger than ever. As the ambulance sped away from the scene, leaving behind the echoes of the gunfight and the howling mountain winds, John knew that this was not an end, but a new beginning. The real fight, for justice, for the dog's freedom, and for a chance at a new life, was just beginning. As John recovered in the hospital, with Blizzard and Avi never far from his side, thanks to Captain Reynolds's intervention, the true scope of the situation began to unfold. Detective Sarah Hawkins, a no-nonsense officer specializing in animal cruelty cases, arrived to take John's statement and shed light on the events that had transpired. "Mr. Walker," Detective Hawkins began, her tone serious but empathetic, "the men who were after you and these dogs are part of an international dogfighting ring we've been trying to bust for years. But there's more to this story than you realize." Detective Hawkins continued, "Blizzard here isn't just any fighting dog. He's what we call a bait dog, used to test the aggression of fighting dogs. But he's also a key witness. Several months ago, during a raid on a suspected dogfighting operation, we found Blizzard. He had a collar with a hidden camera," Hawkins explained, her eyes flickering to the scars visible on Blizzard's neck. "That camera captured crucial evidence, faces, locations, even financial transactions. But before we could secure Blizzard, there was a commotion, and he escaped." The revelation hit John like a thunderbolt. He looked at Blizzard with newfound wonder and heartache, understanding now the depth of the dog's trauma and the weight of his importance. As the detective's words sank in, John felt a mix of emotions: anger at the cruelty Blizzard and Avi had endured, pride in their resilience, and a fierce determination to protect them. The gravity of Detective Hawkins' words hung heavy in the air. John's mind raced, processing the implications of this new information. He looked at Blizzard and Avi, seeing them in a new light, not just as rescued animals, but as key players in dismantling a cruel and extensive criminal network. Detective Hawkins leaned forward, her expression serious. "We need to keep you and the dogs safe while we build our case. But there's another twist, Mr. Walker. Your background as a firefighter, combined with your recent actions, has caught the attention of our Witness Protection Unit." John's eyebrows rose in surprise. Hawkins continued, "They're proposing something unconventional. Instead of simply hiding you away, they want to train you as a specialized foster for rescued fighting dogs. You'd work with law enforcement, rehabilitating dogs like Blizzard and Avi, potentially helping to gather more evidence against these rings." "This isn't just about Blizzard and Avi anymore," Hawkins explained. "Your experience with them, your ability to gain their trust and help them heal, it's invaluable. You could help countless other dogs and play a crucial role in bringing down these fighting rings for good." John realized that the decision he was about to make wouldn't just affect his life, but the lives of many other animals suffering as Blizzard and Avi had. The solitude he had sought in the mountains now seemed like a distant memory. In its place was a new purpose, one that had found him rather than the other way around. Detective Hawkins nodded, a small smile crossing her face. "That's exactly why you're the right person for this, Mr. Walker. So, what do you say? Are you ready to help us change some lives?" In the months that followed John's decision to join the specialized foster program, a whirlwind of activity ensued. John, Blizzard, and Avi were relocated to a secure facility in rural Colorado, where they began their new life and mission. The transition wasn't easy. John underwent intensive training in animal behavior, rehabilitation techniques, and the intricacies of gathering evidence for law enforcement. Blizzard and Avi, too, had their own journey of healing to continue. But together, they formed a unique team, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. As John worked with other rescued dogs, he found that Blizzard had an uncanny ability to calm and connect with the most traumatized animals. Avi, with his playful nature, often helped coax shy dogs out of their shells. The three of them became the heart of the program, their story inspiring others involved in the fight against animal cruelty. The evidence from Blizzard's collar camera, combined with John's testimony and the ongoing work of the program, began to yield results. One by one, key players in the dogfighting ring were identified and apprehended. Each arrest brought a sense of justice and closure, not just for John, Blizzard, and Avi, but for all the animals who had suffered. Perhaps the most significant breakthrough came 6 months into their new life. Detective Hawkins arrived at the facility, her face alight with excitement. "We've got him, John," she announced. "The ringleader, the man responsible for Blizzard's injuries and so many others. He's in custody." The capture of the ringleader marked a turning point, not just in the case, but in John's personal journey. As he watched the news coverage of the arrests and subsequent trials, he realized how far they had come from that stormy night in the mountains. The legal proceedings were grueling, with John called to testify multiple times. Each time he took the stand, he drew strength from Blizzard and Avi's presence in the courtroom, specially arranged by the prosecution to demonstrate the real victims of the dogfighting ring. In the wake of the trials, there was a surge of public interest in the issue of dogfighting and animal cruelty. John, initially reluctant, found himself becoming a spokesperson for the cause. He shared his story and that of Blizzard and Avi, helping to change perceptions about pit bulls and other breeds often associated with fighting. The program John had joined expanded, with similar initiatives springing up across the country. He took on a leadership role, training other fosters and working with law enforcement agencies to improve their approach to animal cruelty cases. As the dust settled on the legal battles and the immediate danger passed, John, Blizzard, and Avi found themselves at a new crossroads. The quiet life in the mountains was a distant memory, replaced by a sense of purpose and a growing extended family of humans and animals united in a common cause. As the dust settled on the legal proceedings and the immediate threat subsided, John found himself in a moment of quiet reflection. Sitting on the porch of their new home, a spacious ranch house that doubled as a rehabilitation center for rescued dogs, he watched Blizzard and Avi playing in the fenced yard. The transformation in both dogs was remarkable. Blizzard, once wary and battle-scarred, now moved with a quiet confidence. His amber eyes, once filled with fear, now shone with contentment and trust. Avi, no longer the trembling pup from the mountain cabin, had blossomed into a joyful, energetic young dog, his playful nature fully emerged. John felt a lump form in his throat as he considered their journey. From that stormy night when Blizzard first appeared on his doorstep to now, they had traversed a path of healing, danger, and ultimately redemption. The emotional weight of their experiences washed over him. Tears welled up in his eyes, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude and love. He had set out to save these dogs, but in truth, they had saved him just as much. As John sat there, surrounded by the unconditional love of Blizzard and Avi, he reflected on the ripple effects of their shared journey. The impact extended far beyond just the three of them. John remembered the faces of the families who had adopted these rehabilitated dogs, their eyes shining with the same love and wonder he felt for Blizzard and Avi. He had witnessed firsthand how these dogs, once deemed dangerous or damaged, had become beloved family members, therapy animals, and even service dogs. The change in public perception was palpable too. Through their story and their work, people were beginning to see pit bulls and other bully breeds in a new light. The stigma was slowly being replaced by understanding and empathy. But perhaps the most profound impact was the one John felt within himself. The man who had once sought isolation as a means of coping with his past traumas now found healing in connection. With Blizzard and Avi, with the dogs they helped, with the community that had formed around their cause. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, John felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. The path ahead was clear: to continue this work, to be a voice for the voiceless, and to nurture the incredible bond he shared with Blizzard and Avi. As the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, John stood up from the porch, Blizzard and Avi rising with him. Together, they walked towards the rehabilitation center, where the soft whines and barks of their newest rescues could be heard. John paused at the entrance, taking in the sight before him. The center, once just a dream, was now a beacon of hope for abused and neglected animals. It stood as a testament to the transformative power of love, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. He thought about the journey ahead, the challenges they would face, the lives they would touch, and the changes they would continue to make in the world. There would be difficult days, he knew, but with Blizzard and Avi by his side, he felt ready for anything. Blizzard nudged John's hand, his wise eyes seeming to say, "We're home." Avi pranced ahead, his tail wagging in excitement for the new day's adventures. 5 years later, John's rehabilitation center had become a nationally recognized model for animal rescue and rehabilitation. Blizzard, now a seasoned therapy dog, continued to work his magic with traumatized animals, while Avi had become a beloved mascot for their education programs. John, honored as a leading advocate for animal welfare, never forgot the snowy night that changed everything, grateful for the unexpected journey that gave his life new purpose. Inspired by John, Blizzard, and Avi's story, you too can make a difference in the lives of animals. Consider adopting from a shelter, supporting local rescue organizations, or volunteering your time. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, can change an animal's life. Remember, compassion has the power to transform not just the lives of animals, but our own as well.